Welcome back to the TimCo Retail Manager course. This course focuses on real-world application development. Basically, this is a practice for what you'll be asked to do in a real job. Now, in this lesson, we're going to add images to our database for our products. Then, we'll update the API to pass these images to the caller. And finally, we'll update our Blazor WebAssembly products page to properly display these images instead of those basic placeholders. Basically, this is a lesson that's going to have it all. So for those of you who are subscribers to my Patreon at the $5 per month level or higher, head over to get a copy of today's source code. If you want the source code for this video, head over to Patreon and sign up. Now, I don't guarantee that previous episodes will be on there. So if you're watching this later, you will find this course on IamTimCory.com as a full course. In fact, we already have Phases 1 and 2 on there. Phase 3 will be on there as soon as we complete it. So you'll be able to catch up and get a certificate of completion. You'll get downloadable videos and a whole lot more. And if you have the All Access Pass already, then you'll get access to it immediately. All right, let's jump right into Visual Studio and get this thing started. So we just start off in the database itself. And in here, we need to add in the tables, in the products, we need to add a place for images. So let's say down here, product image, and we're going to give this a nvarchar, and not 50. Let's give it a larger size. It could be up to 2,000 characters. That's a little bit excessive, but it could be because it's a URL. So let's trim that down. Something more reasonable. Let's just say 500, not 5,000, 500. And we are going to allow nulls. Now there's two reasons for this. The first reason is because you can't add to an existing table a column that is not null and not have a default value. So let's just say you have 10 records in the, let's actually look at it. So let's go over to our database, SQL Server, local DB, databases, TRM data, tables, product. All right, so let's go view data. We have 2 records. So there's the book finish and there's 8 end loop batteries. Well, if we add a new column here and we say it is not nullable, but we don't give it a default value, it won't know what to put in these 2 records. So it can't do that. So you either have to mark it nullable or you have to give it a default value over here to know what to put in those columns. But we're going to mark it as allows null because the other reason we want to be nullable is that we might not have images for everything. So if we don't have an image, we're going to pass in null. So there we go. There's our product. Let's go over to our store procedures and let's look at product get by ID. Well, we need to add an extra entry here to say product image. There we go. Product image. We need to save that store procedure. And we have product get all. And again, we need to have, let's shrink this down some. We need to have product image as well. So this is going to make sure that all of our SQL store procedures as well as our table all have that extra column. Now we don't have any views, so we're good there. So I think we're all set now for our project. We can go ahead and publish this. Now I already have the publish script set up. It's going to publish the right location. I just need to say publish. It's going to create the new script. It's going to publish it. That's successful. You go back over to the database. We can hit refresh on this. And now look at our product page. Let's go to data. And we now have product image null for both of these records. Cool. Now we're going to manually modify these 2 images once we have them, but but that will at least get us started. So we actually have our database updated. Now let's go to our API. And our API does have this www root folder. In here, let's right click and say add folder images. And then in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a couple sample images. I'm going to copy them and right click and say paste. And I have one called end loop and one called finish. These happen to be images I pulled off of the web. Well, now if you run, let's just run this whole thing, which we haven't changed anything except for our database, but that should be fine. It shouldn't cause any problems. What's going to happen is, since the models don't ask for the product image, they're not going to get the product image captured. That's not a big deal. So here's our API. So if we go /images/ finish.jpg, there's the finish book and end loop. Oops, E-N-E. Oops. E-N-E, and a loop. There we go. There's the batteries. By the way, yes, these are great batteries. Yes, that's a great book. Definitely thing to check out. So let's grab that URL. And we're going to close this down. We'll close this down. We'll close down all the things that opened up. And I'm going to put, that was the end loop. I'm going to paste that in here. I'm going to paste in here, and I'll change it to be finish instead. Now, right now, it's using the API's full path. Localhost 5001 images finish. For a production app, I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to have the full path because, of course, localhost isn't going to work once we're in production. Well, if we come down here to our web apps, our portal, let's look at our, we have in here an app settings. There we go. And I believe in here we do. We have the API right here. So what we can do is we can take off that first part, the actual URL to the API, and just put the path, so the relative path inside the API. So now the only thing you need to know is that these are attached to the API. That's all you need to know. And now when you push to production, that can be, api.timco.com or api.timcoenterprises.com, whatever it is, and then /images/finish. It will work. That also reduces the amount of redundant data we're storing in these columns, because now we don't need to store the root path of our API. So with that, we have the API updated. It's pointing to these files right here. They're being served up in our API. Now we can come down to our WPF project and the library, because actually this library we're using for both WPF and for our portal. In here, in models, we can go to product model, and the formatting has put the get and the set on separate lines. Oh well, that's unfortunate. We can probably redo that, but that was from the editor config formatting. We can play around and get that fixed at a later time. So prop, it's a string, and we're going to say that this is a what do we call this over here? We called it product image. Okay, and that should be about it. Let's just check our API call to make sure. So product endpoint, and we just get the product model, which that should work. So now we should have the product image all the way over on our portal. Now you may say, well, Tim, how did that ever work? You just changed a model and that's it. Well, that's because we're using Dapper. And what Dapper does is it looks through your model and says, okay, what properties do you have? And then it goes over to the call, which that's our store procedure. And it says, okay, what columns do you have? Let's match those two up. Let's put any column that matches a property name, and we'll fill the data there. And if we don't find a property, we just ignore it. And if we have a property that we don't have a column name for, we ignore that as well. So it's a pretty smart, pretty robust system that makes it really easy to do those kind of modifications. So now over on our pages, let's go to products. And here we're going to replace our call here. Now we know that it is our local host call. Let's just do this for now. And then we're going to say after that, it's going to be at product dot, oops. It's not going to like me trying to concatenate these right in line like this. Not a problem. What we can do is let's just cut this part out. We'll delete the rest. I'm going to say at curly brace and close curly brace. And then in here, we will say string interpolation. And inside here, we'll say our that, and then we'll say product dot. Oops, we need to have not curly braces, I think. There we go. Product dot product image. Let's try that real quick. It's a quick and dirty fix for our source. We'll replace this in a minute, but I just want to make sure it works. Okay, try and get the smallest unit of work working before you try and get the larger unit of work working. So let's wait for this to load. We'll see if we're logged in. Yes, we're logged in. Go to products, and no, they are not working. Let's figure out why. Hit F12, and we'll select the image. And it just says localhost 5001. That's it. Okay, so it's not getting that product image. Let's find out why. So let's do this. Let's put a breakpoint at the end here. We'll start this up again and make sure that we're actually loading those images. Okay, so we go to products. Let's mouse over this. We can also go to the locals window. And in fact, we're going to probably have to because, yeah, let's go to the immediate window and go to products, 0, like so. Products at position 0, description. And it's not giving me anything. That's interesting. Not quite sure why that is. It should be giving us. Yep, it does give me that, but it's not enumerating it for me properly. Let's find out why. I'm not sure why. So let's come up here and put a breakpoint right here. If we can, we'll hit continue. And it's not going to honor that breakpoint. All right, well, we can still figure this out. So there's ways of getting this to work. This list of product model, let's see why this does not work. I'm not quite sure. These aren't being hit. Blazor WebAssembly is a little tricky when it comes to debugging things because of the fact that it tries to live fully on the client side. So you do have to do a little bit more work to figure out what's going on and why. Let's go back over to our Solution Explorer. Let's come back to our API, and we're going to go to our controllers, our product controller, and we're going to, well, this is going to do a return all one line. This is why I don't like these lines. Let's stop this whole thing. Because this one liner right here, what it's going to do is we're going to get the data and return it all in one line. Now we can step through this, but the easiest thing to do is to say var products equals this right here, and then return products like that. And now you can make sure that you have that value captured. So with this, let's start this up again. I'm going to step through, make sure that we have this product at every stage. We'll put another breakpoint in. I probably should have already done it. Let's do that. Let's go over to our WPF project and go to our product endpoint where we have our get all. And what we're going to do is put a breakpoint here at the result. And now we will load up our Blazor product, go to products. And products right now, we have a count of 2. Let's go to the first one. It's a little tiny, but aha. Let's zoom in here. What are we missing? Well, we're missing that extra. I forgot we have the model inside the API. We're missing the model here. Doesn't have the product image. I think that should be it for loading that. Let's try it again. That breakpoint's still there. Wait for it to be done. And we'll call it again, see if, in fact, it's passing it through. And again, it's small, but this is the quickest way of doing this. There you go. Images finish. So it is getting it there. So you can take that breakpoint off. We can run this. And boom, it's actually showing up properly in our API or in our WebAssembly project. So now we have what looks like a real product page. It has images that have gone from the database, from the API, all the way through the front end and onto our page. Now the cool thing is that right now I'm hosting these on my API. And as we saw, and let's close all this stuff down. There's a whole lot of extra stuff it leaves open. But as you saw, we have it right in the images of our API. But you don't have to do that if you don't want to. In fact, what we could do is we could say, well, these are actually cached on a CDN or on a separate server, something like that. Just put the file path in there. It doesn't matter where the file path leads. It can even not be on your own server, which can offload some of that loading time. So just note that that is available to you. You don't have to have it on your API if you don't want, but it is a very convenient place to put it if you don't have anywhere else you want it. All right, so we still have, let's get rid of these. We still have a bit of an issue here, and that is this kludge, which is getting this, getting the API portion of this. So let's set this up properly. In order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to grab this portion of it early. So let's grab this down here as private string API, or just API. Okay, and then in here, what we'll do is we're going to grab that API's URL. That we can have this portion of it put in place. Now, where do we get the API's URL from? Well, if we go over to Solution Explorer in authentication, I think it's the authentication service. Yes, okay. So we asked for the I configuration. So let's grab that. Let's go back to the top. We're going to inject I configuration. We're going to call this, let's call it config. That's fine. And right now it doesn't know where I configuration is found. So that namespace is Microsoft.extensions.configuration. So we could either, we could add a using statement here if you want. So like so, and that'll take care of I configuration for us. Or we could add that to our where is it? Our import statement right here, imports.razor. So imports.razor will apply to all the pages that are below it, which would in this case be all of them. And that will make it easier to get configuration. But since we're only doing it once right now, we'll just add the using statement. So down here, we can say API equals config dot, and it's get value, I believe. Or in this case, we're just using the, like this, but I think we can just do get value of the API. And this is a get value needs a type. It's a string value. I believe that should work. Let's find out. We're going to have it now as the API. We can replace this piece right here with API, like so. Yes, we could go back and modify all of these properties inside of the model, but that is terribly inefficient versus just doing it this way. So let's run this and see if they still load now that we're pulling the API from the config file instead of from hard coding it. So products, hey, they still work. That's always a good thing when it still works. So we now have the proper URL set up here so that when we publish this and we have a different API URL, it will still work because it's going to point to the www.config appsettings.json. It's going to point to this API. Now, when we publish this is one of the things that confuses people. They ask, well, why would you ever have it in the JSON file instead of hard-coded? Or why does it matter if it's here? What's the difference? Well, during publish, we're going to build the project once. But then we're going to modify this every time we deploy it to a different location. So we're going to modify this for development to say something like our developmentapi.com. And that'll be the API's location. And then for staging, it might be staging.ourdevelopmentapi.com. And then for production, it might be api.timcoenterprises.com. So it can change the URL, and that will change for our entire application in one location. So that way we can change it on the fly without having to recompile our code. So you want anything in here that might change based upon your environment. So right now my environment is my local dev environment. I will probably have, in a normal business, I would have at least 3 public environments, public meaning for my team. So a development environment, a staging environment, and then at least a production environment. You might have a pre-production environment as well. That's really helpful for getting things up and running and tested one last time before you swap it over to production. But in any event, this will allow us to make all those changes without having to modify source code. So with that, that was actually a pretty short lesson. I mean, it works really well. Now we have things set up properly. We can go in there and make the modification. The only thing we had to do was make sure that we had a change in our API model as well as our UI model to capture that new column. All right. So the other thing is, now that new column is in place, we could go and modify it to say not null if we never wanted to have a missing image. But I don't think that's the right call for a couple reasons. First of all, I still want that nullable so that if it is null, we pass it through as null. But the other thing is that if we do that and then we publish it, all those changes to a database that hasn't had every change published one at a time, then it's going to skip that step of nullable, and we're going to have a problem because it's going to say, no, I can't make the change because the column is required and I don't have values for all of the rows. So we don't want to do that for those 2 reasons. Now, speaking of nullable, I think we do need to address that. The idea that I want to have some kind of option here to show the image when it's null. Show something, a placeholder or something. By the way, our alt text is incorrect now. We need to change this to be product dot, and let's do the product name. We should probably have product alt text in our database, but we can use product name for now. But let's do this. Let's copy this entire line. Actually, let's cut it and say if, and this is going to be product dot, let's see, product image is null. And right now, by default, strings are nullable, so that's not a problem. So I can say if it is null, do this, which is just paste back in what we had, and else, and paste in again what we had. But we want to put the original back in, that original entry we had, but I did not save it. That's okay, because I have Git, and Git source control is awesome. Now, if I'd already committed, then I would have to compare with a previous commit, which you can do, but this is the really easiest way. Right click on it and say Git compare with unmodified. I could view history if I want to go back previous versions, but compare with unmodified. Since I haven't committed yet, let's scroll down and note that this is what was deleted, this red. Well, I can just grab that source right there, grab that URL, copy it, come over here, and I can get rid of all this stuff and paste it in like so. So this is going to be, instead of my alt text being that, let's say placeholder image. So now if it is null, then, and actually let's not even do null. Let's cut this out and say string.is null or white space. That way, if it's a white space as well, same thing, we're gonna display this dummy image instead. Okay, now let's test this. And to test it, I need to go to my SQL Server, go to my products, and I can just delete one of these. So let's Control X to cut it out, save it, and now I can, by the way, it saves as soon as you click out of the row. And now I can run my application and see if in fact it's going to show the proper placeholder, and it does, the proper placeholder for the book. We could do a different placeholder, like a coming soon. In fact, if we modify this, let's go to that URL. Let me grab what it was. It's called dummyimage.com. And right now we have a 12 by 9. So 12 by 9. That's what we have right now. Okay, that's our URL. However, we can say coming soon, like that. I don't know why it's red. Oh. Whoops. There we go. And why is it red? I don't know. But the text should say coming soon. And so the modification is and text or ampersand text equals coming plus soon. So let's just modify, first of all, our F12 here. Select the element and say, oops, not that. Edit as HTML. Ampersand text equals coming plus soon. Like so. I'll copy that just so I have it. And it's in red. Excellent. I don't want it in red. I want it in white. So let's figure out why it's displaying in white. It looks like it should be just black and white. Let's try editing again. And let's change that from 3 zeros to 6 and 3 Fs to 6. There we go. I'm not sure why that works, because 3 zeros and 3 Fs should be black and white. It shouldn't be that it messes that up, because CSS handles it just fine. But in any event, that's what works. So we're going to do that. Let's close this out, and we will modify this. So 456 FFF, and the text is coming plus soon. So now if we run this again, make sure it works before we say yes, it's good. All right, so go to products page and coming soon in black and white. Excellent. Now, if we modify our database, which I have to shut down to see it in here, we can go, I overwrote it, but not a problem. It is finish.jpg. And now you can run this again and test to make sure that, in fact, yes, it does grab the finish image again. Okay, so load up, boom, finish image, we're good to go. That's all it took to get our images in place, get a placeholder image in place in case there is no image in the database, which we have the ability to have null images. So that's a good thing. And we've got it all the way through from our database, through our API, into our front end. People do have the question often about models. So I did modify, let's close all tabs. I did modify 2 different models. So we have in our, actually our WPF or UI.library, which technically serves both the WPF project and the portal. I have the product model, which we just modified the product image. But then I also have in the APIs library, I have the product model, and it's the same. Now, could we share these two? Probably. And there's a lot of overlap. In fact, these two are identical, but some of them might not be quite the same because different UIs have different rules around what to decorate it with and why. So I haven't shared the models, but we probably could, at least for some of them. Just be careful not to get so eager to share things that you work yourself into a corner where you say, okay, I've shared all my models, I have a shared project that everyone can see and work off of, and it's all great. I have saved myself, what is this, 35 lines of typing, and I make sure that, if I change it in one place, it changes everywhere. Great, except for the fact that if you needed to make a modification to your API, but not your UI, that might be a problem. So that's where you gotta be careful on sharing models, that you don't lock yourself in where now you have to modify multiple projects in order to make a change in one project. Or you have to kind of have the lowest common denominator when it comes to these models because of the fact they're used everywhere. It's cheap to create a new model. Yes, it is repetition, but it's not the same thing as violating dry, the don't repeat yourself idea. And the reason why it's not a violation of dry is because if they are different, meaning they're serving different purposes, even if the code is the same for now, they're different. So if they serve different purposes, they can at some point diverge, and that's okay. But if you said, oh, but dry means I have to have only one copy of any bit of code, then they can't diverge and you're kind of locked in. So just keep that in mind. It is a balancing act. And if you have to err on one side, I'd actually say err on the side of making multiple copies. Yes, that's not ideal for business logic code, but for models, it's not the end of the world. Okay. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're thinking these things through. Don't just get so hung up on the idea that dry must rule your life that you forget to look at your actual project. All right, so that's it for this lesson. Thanks for watching, and as always, I am Tim Corey.